love and death. There is no side of life that is not capable of revealing to us an infinity of the new and the unexpected, if we approach it with a knowledge that is not exhausted by its visibility. If we remain convinced that beyond this there lies a whole invisible world of new, incomprehensible forces and relations. Acknowledgement of the existence of this invisible world is the first key to it. A wealth of newness unfolds to us in the most mysterious sides of our existence, in those sides through which we come into direct contact with eternity. In love and in death. In Hindu mythology, love and death are the two faces of one deity, Shiva, god of the creative force in nature. It is at the same time the god of violent death, murder and destruction. His wife is Parvati, goddess of beauty, love and happiness. She is also Kali or Durga, goddess of evil, misfortune, sickness and death. Together Shiva and Kali are the gods of wisdom, knowledge, good and evil. In the beginning of his book, The Drama of Love and Death, Edward Carpenter, published by Mitchell Kennelly in 1912, New York and London, he defines our relation to these incomprehensible and enigmatic sides of existence. Quote, "Love and death move through this world of ours like things apart, underrunning it truly and everywhere present, yet seeming to belong to some other mode of existence." End quote. Further on he writes, "These figures, love and death, move through the world like the closest friends indeed, never far apart, and together dominating it in a kind of triumphant superiority. And yet like bitter enemies, dogging each other's footsteps, undoing each other's work, fighting for the bodies and souls of mankind." End quote. In these few words is shown the contents of the enigma that confronts us, encompassing, creating and annihilating us. However, man's relation to the two aspects of this enigma is not identical. Strange as it may seem, the face of death has had a greater attraction for the mystical imagination of men than the face of love. There have always been attempts to understand and define the hidden meanings of death. All religions and all religious doctrines begin by giving to man this or that idea of death. It is impossible to construct any system of world contemplation without some definition of death, and there are numerous systems such as contemporary spiritualism that consist almost entirely of views upon death, of doctrines about death and post-mortem existence. However, the problem of love, in the contemporary way of examining the world, is regarded as something given, as something already understood and known. Different systems contribute little that is enlightening to an understanding of love. So although love is for us the same enigma as death, for some strange reason we think about it less. We seem to have developed certain cut and dried standards with regard to our understanding of love, and men thoughtlessly accept this or that standard. Art, which from its unique nature ought to have much more to say on this subject, gives a great deal of attention to love. Love always has been and perhaps shall remain the principal theme of art. However, even art chiefly confines itself to descriptions and to the psychological analysis of love, seldom touching upon those infinite and eternal depths that love contains for man. In reality, love is a cosmic phenomenon, in which mankind, humanity, are merely accidents. A cosmic phenomenon that has nothing to do with either the lives or the souls of men, any more than because the sun is shining, by its light men can go about their petty affairs, and may utilize its rays for their own purposes. If men could understand this, even with a part of their consciousness, then a new world would open up, and to gaze upon life from our usual angles of perception would become very strange. For then they would understand that love is something else and of quite a different order from the poetic phenomena of earthly life. Perhaps love is a world of strange spirits who at times take up their abode in men, subduing them to themselves, making them tools for the accomplishment of their inscrutable purposes. Perhaps it is some particular region of an inner world wherein the souls of men sometimes enter and live according to the laws of that world, while their bodies remain on earth, bound by the laws of earth. Perhaps it is the alchemical work of some great master wherein the souls and bodies of men play the role of elements, out of which is compounded a philosopher's stone, elixir of life, or some mysterious force necessary for some incomprehensible purpose. Love, in relation to our life, is a deity, sometimes terrible and sometimes benevolent, but never subservient to us, never consenting to serve our purpose. Men strive to subordinate love to themselves, to warp it to the uses of their everyday life and to their soul's purposes. However, it is impossible to subordinate love to anything, and it mercilessly revenges itself upon those mortals who would subordinate creation to themselves and make it serve them. It confuses all of their calculations, forcing them to do things that confound them, forcing them to serve itself and to do what it wants. Mistaken about the origin of love, men are mistaken about its result. Both positivist and spiritual morality equally admit only one possible result of love: offspring, the propagation of species. But this objective result, which may or may not happen, is only the result of an external, objective side of love. If it is possible to see in love nothing more than this material fact and the desire for propagation, then so be it. However, in reality love consists not only of material facts and the results of it, except material outcomes, can manifest themselves on quite another plane. The other plane upon which love acts, and the ignored, hidden results of love are not difficult to understand, even from the strictly positivistic point of view. To science, which studies life from this standpoint, the purpose of love is the continuation of life. More precisely, love is a link in the chain of facts supporting the continuation of life. The force which attracts the two sexes to each other is acting in the interests of propagation, and is accordingly created by those forms for the continuation of their species. However, if we regard love in this way, then it is impossible not to recognize that there is much more of this force than is necessary. Herein lies the key to correct understanding and the true nature of love. There is more of this force than is necessary. Infinitely more, and in reality only an infinitesimal part of love's force incarnate in humanity is utilized for the purpose of the continuation of the species. So where then does the major part of this force go to? We know that nothing can be lost, so if energy exists, then it must transform itself into something. Now, if a merely negligible percentage of energy goes into the creation of the future by begetting, then the remainder must go into the creation of the future too, but in some other way. We have in the physical world many cases in which the direct function is affected by a very small percentage of the original consumed energy, and the greater part is spent without return, as it were. However, of course, this greater part of energy does not disappear. It is not wasted, but accomplishes other results, quite different from the direct function. Take the example of a common candle. It gives light, however it also gives considerably more heat than light. Light is the direct function of the candle, heat the indirect, yet we get more heat than light. A candle is a furnace, adapted for the purpose of lighting, and in order to give light a candle must burn. Combustion is a necessary function for the production of light from a candle. It is impossible to ignore this combustion, but the same combustion also gives off heat. At first thought it appears that the heat from a candle is spent unproductively. Sometimes it is superfluous, unpleasant, and even annoying. If a room is lit by many candles during the summer, then it will grow excessively hot. However, the fact remains that light is received from a candle only because of combustion, by the development of heat and the incandescence of volatilized gases. The same thing is also true in the case of love. We may say that a negligible part of love's energy goes into posterity. The greater part is spent by the male and female in personal emotion, as it were. But this also is necessary, as without this expenditure on the ritual of love, the principal objective could not be achieved. Only because of these, at first sight, collateral results of love, only because of all the tempest of emotions, feelings, effervescence, desires, thoughts, dreams, fantasies and inner creations, only because of the beauty that it creates, can love fulfill its immediate function. Furthermore, and this is perhaps the most important, the superfluous energy is not wasted at all, but transformed into other forms of energy, possible to discover. Generally speaking, the significance of indirect results may often be of more importance than the significance of direct ones. Since we are able to trace how the energy of love transforms itself into instincts, ideas, and creative forces of expression on different planes of life, into symbols of art, song, music and poetry. Then so too can we imagine how that same energy could transform itself into a higher order of intuition, into a higher consciousness that will reveal to us a marvelous and mysterious world. In all of living nature, and perhaps also in that which we consider dead, love is the motive force that gives expression to the most diverse expression of creativity. What appears as a collateral function of love, from the point of view of an individual, may serve as a principal function of the species. In springtime, with the first awakening of love's emotions, birds begin to sing, grow new plumage and build nests. Positivist science would explain this by saying that singing and gaudy plumage act as an attraction between the species. However, even a positivist cannot deny that there is a great deal more of this singing than is necessary for the continuation of the species. For the positivist, singing is merely a byproduct, whereas in reality this singing might be the principal function of the given species, the realization of its existence, the purpose pursued by nature in creating this particular genus. That singing might be necessary, not so much to attract the female of the species, but for some general harmony of nature that we only rarely and imperfectly sense. In this case, what we observe and what appears to be a collateral function of love, from the standpoint of the individual, might serve as a principal function of the species. Furthermore, there are no fledglings as yet. There is even no intimation of them. However, homes are being prepared nevertheless. Love inspires this orgy of activity, and instinct directs it because it is expedient from the standpoint of the species. At the first awakening of love this work begins. One and the same desire creates a new generation and those conditions under which this new generation will live. One and the same desire urges forward creative activity in all directions, brings the pairs together for the birth of a new generation and makes them build, creating for this future generation. We observe the same thing in the world of men, where love too is the creative force, and the creativity of love does not manifest itself in one direction only but in many ways. It is possible that by the spur of love, eros, humanity is aroused to the fulfillment of its principal function of which we know nothing, but at times only by glimpses, hazily perceive. Even without reference to the purpose of the existence of humanity, within the limits of our knowledge, we must recognize that all the creative activity of humanity results from love. Our entire world revolves around love as its center. Love unfolds in a human being traits of his which he never knew in himself. In love there is much both of the Stone Age and of the witches' Sabbath. By anything less than love, many men cannot be induced to commit a crime. To be guilty of treason, to reanimate in themselves such feelings as they thought to have killed out long ago. In love is hidden an infinity of egoism, vanity and selfishness. Love is the potent force that tears off all masks, and those who run away from love do so in order that they may preserve their masks. If creation, the birth of ideas, is the light that comes from love, then this light comes from a great fire. In this eternally burning fire, in which humanity and the entire world are being incessantly purified, all the forces of human spirit and of genius are being evolved and refined. And perhaps from this very same fire, or at least by its aid, some new force will arise that can deliver from the chains of matter, materialism, all those who follow where it leads. Speaking not figuratively but literally, it may be said that love, being the most powerful of all emotions, unveils in the soul of man all of its qualities, both patent and latent. It may also unfold those new potencies that even now constitute the object of occultism and mysticism. The development of powers in the human soul so deeply hidden that by the majority of men their very existence is denied. In most cases love, as it exists in modern life, has become a trifling array of feelings and sensations. It is difficult in the conditions that govern society to imagine such love as will not interfere with mystical aspirations. Temples of love and mystical celebrations of love exist in reality no longer. There is the everyday manner of life, and of psychological labyrinths from which those who rise a little above the ordinary level can only desire to flee. For this reason certain fine forms of asceticism are developing quite naturally. The ascetic does not slander love, does not blaspheme against it, and does not try to convince itself that love is an abomination from which it is necessary to run away. It is Platonism rather than asceticism. It recognizes that love is the sun, but often does not see its way to live in the sunlight, and so considers it better not to see the sun at all, to divine it in the soul only, rather than receive its light through darkened or smoked glasses. In general, love represents for us too great an enigma, and often the denial of love or asceticism take on strange and unnatural forms, even with persons who are quite sincere but unable to understand the mystical aspects of love. When one encounters those perversions of love, one involuntarily calls to mind the words of Zarathustra. Quote, "Voluptuousness, unto all hair-shirted despisers of the body, a string and stake, and cursed is the world by all backworldsmen, for it mocketh and befooleth all erring, misinferring teachers. Voluptuousness, to the rabble the slow fire at which it is burnt, to all wormy wood, to all stinking rags, the prepared heat and stew furnace. Voluptuousness, to free hearts, a thing innocent and free, the garden happiness of the earth, all the future's thanks overflow to the present. Voluptuousness, only to the withered a sweet poison, to the lion-willed, however, the great cordial and the reverently saved wine of wines. Voluptuousness, the great symbolic happiness of a higher happiness and highest hope. For to many is marriage promised and more than marriage, to many that are more unknown to each other than man and woman, and who hath fully understood how unknown to each other are man and woman." End quote. Friedrich Nietzsche, Thus Spake Zarathustra, published by Bonney and Liverite in New York, see pages 195 and 196. To the majority of us, approaching the threshold of the great mystery, much is closed or open subject to our understanding of love, because for many this question represents the greatest obstacle. In love, the most important element is that which is not, which absolutely does not exist from the usual worldly, materialistic or subjective point of view. In this sensing of that which is not, and in the contact thus reached with the world of the truly real, lies the principal meaning of love in human life. In moments of powerful emotion, of great joy or of great suffering, everything happening around about a person seems to them unreal, a dream. This is the beginning of the soul's awakening, when one in a dream begins to be conscious of the fact that they are asleep, and that what they see is a dream, then they are waking up. So too our soul begins to be conscious of the fact that all visible life is a dream, approaching its awakening. The more powerful, the brighter the inner emotions are, then so much more quickly will the moment of awareness of the unreality of life arise. It is interesting to consider love and our relation to love using the method and analogy applied to the comparative study of different dimensions. Again, it is necessary to imagine a world of plane beings, observing phenomena entering their plane from another unknowable world, such as the change in color of the lines upon a plane, in reality depending upon the rotation through the plane of a wheel with multicolored spokes. The plane beings believe that the phenomena arise within the limits of their plane, from causes also belonging to the same plane, and that they are finished there. All similar phenomena are also to them identical, such as two circles that in reality belong to two entirely different objects. Upon this foundation they erect their science and their morality. Yet if they could but decide to discard their two-dimensional psychology, and try to understand the true substance of these phenomena, then with the aid and by means of these phenomena they could sever their connection with their plane, arise and fly up above it, discovering a greater and unknown world. The question of love holds exactly the same place in our life. Only he who can see considerably beyond the facts discerns love's true meaning, and it is impossible to illumine these facts by the light of that which lies behind them. He who is able to see beyond these facts begins to discern much newness in love and through love. The Ocean of Sex, Edward Carpenter, from his book Towards Democracy. To hold in continence the great sea, the great ocean of sex, within one, with flux and reflux pressing upon the bounds of the body, the beloved genitals, vibrating, swaying emotional to the star glint of the eyes of all human beings, reflecting heaven and all creatures, how wonderful! Scarcely a figure, male or female approaches, but a tremor travels across it. As when on the cliff which bounds the edge of a pond someone moves, then in the bowels of the water also there is a mirrored movement, so too on the edge of this ocean. The glory of the human form, even faintly outlined under the trees or by the shore, convulses it with far reminiscences, yet strong and solid the sea banks, not lightly overpassed, till maybe to the touch, to the approach, to the incantation of the eyes of one, it bursts forth, uncontrollable. O wonderful ocean of sex, ocean of millions and millions of tiny seed-like human forms contained, if they be truly contained, within each person, mirror of the very universe, sacred temple and innermost shrine of each body, ocean river flowing ever on through the great trunk and branches of humanity, from which after all the individual only springs like a leaf bud. Ocean that we so wonderfully contain, if indeed we do not contain thee, and yet who contains us? Sometimes when I feel and know thee within and identify myself with thee, do I understand that I also am the dateless brood of heaven and eternity. End quote. Returning to that from which we started, relations between the fundamental laws of our existence, love and death, the true mutual correlation of which remains enigmatical and incomprehensible to us, we can recall Schopenhauer's words with which he ends his Counsels and Maxims. Quote, I should point out how beginning and end meet together and how closely and intimately Eros is connected with death, how Orcus, or Amenthus, as the Egyptians called him, is not only the receiver, but also the giver of all things. Death is the great reservoir of life. Everything comes from Orcus, everything that is alive now and was once there. Could we but understand this great trick by which that is done, then all the world would be clear. End quote. Translation by T.B. Saunders, published by M.A. Macmillan Company, in New York.